So I want to welcome you and thank you for attending today's webinar, Windchill Parts Classification. So this is an extension and a capability within Windchill that really helps manufacturers save money, save time. A lot of times you want to reuse parts and you're not able to. A lot of times engineers have trouble finding the parts that part file that they've already created. So they create another one, and then you get backed up with multiple, the same parts, but it's the same part, but it has a different part number because an engineer created it. Again, this can get messy. So what we're going to do is, my name is Rob Romanowski. I'm the Director of Sales Operations with 3HTI. As a panelist, I have Jeff Gavio, our Director of Marketing. And leading us today is going to be Zach Carson, who is an applications engineer and solution consultant with PTC. So Zach is going to take us through a presentation and a brief demo of Windchill Parts Classification, just to give you some more insight to what it does and how it might be able to help you. So with that, Zach, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for the intro, Rob. PowerPoint's acting up. I don't really know why it keeps going to the next slide here, but we'll make it work.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
there's gremlins among us.
I know. I'm not even touching my keyboard, and it just keeps advancing here. But it's all right.
It's a cue to get me to shut up.
Well, yeah.
Let's move.
Right. Yeah, it keeps me from having to say it. All right. Yeah, so let's get started. So Rob already gave a brief introduction into what Windchill Parts Classification really is. In Windchill, it's a tool that we have that is going to help you manage different parts in your system based on attributes that really promotes reuse and helps to reduce inventory in your system. Okay, so from talking to so many companies in the industry, we have found that most of them face pretty similar challenges when it comes to managing all of the parts that your organization uses. That starts with an inability for designers to actually find and reuse those parts. And what that really results in typically is a lot of part proliferation and duplication. The designers end up redesigning parts, and then you end up having multiple copies of the same or very similar parts that you're kind of stuck with an overabundance of in your inventory. You can't get a good track or a good gauge on the quantities, the life cycle state, the current version, even the updated model, as compared to maybe an obsolete version of that design. Now, as a byproduct of that, as the engineers are remaking the designs, they're also essentially being unproductive because they now have to waste a lot of what would have been value-added time on redesigning things that may or may not exist simply because you just can't find that original model. You put those together, and really what happens is it results in increased inventory costs because you end up managing and purchasing duplicates of a lot of parts that you're never even going to use. And even if it's one part, repeat this process 100 times, maybe even 1,000 times if you're doing it for long enough, and that's going to dramatically shoot up your costs of inventory, your cost of labor, because you're paying these engineers to essentially repeat work that they've already done. So what PTC has introduced as the solution to the challenges is Windchill Parts Classification. What this really brings to the table is, first off, advanced searching capabilities within the Classification Explorer, where you can actually search for objects in Windchill based on just really whatever the component is. There's different attributes. You'll decide, and you'll get to see this in the demonstration, but you're going to lay out different classifications, different schema, different criteria that your parts are going to be organized within. An example might be, if you look here on the right-hand side, we have some different object types. And then if you look towards the bottom of that picture, you'll see an option for a classification and also criteria. So an example of this, of a component that we might classify, would be a diode or a resistor, for example. Or, if you're managing those, if you're managing a resistor, then a characteristic you might filter a search on would be resistance, or if you're managing washers, things like outer diameter, inner diameter, whatever specifications you lay out that are going to help everybody in your organization find the components that you're looking for. That's really the idea here. Now, within this Classification Explorer, You're also able to tailor part structure configurations. So if you take the picture on the right here, for example, in your browser, you could choose between, let's say, electronic and mechanical components. And then within, let's say, the electronic category, you'll have all of your different electronic components. And then within each one of those, you could set up different subcategories for each of those components. And that way you're really narrowing it down. So right within electronic, we have capacitors, connectors, inductors, integrated circuits. Within each one of these categories, we're going to have more criteria to filter on. So it's making sure that all of your components are well organized and they're easy for everyone in Windchill to find, even if someone's unaware of whether or not you actually have a part. They can come in here and figure that out extremely fast. Never have to type in a formal, part number or part name or anything like that. And what this is doing is really providing you with a single point of access to all of your data, where you can just quickly search for parts to use or reuse for different designs. And the way that that's really possible is it comes down to your WT parts. The WT parts contain all of the information pertaining to the object, so that way the designers, the engineers, whoever it is, can look at the part and in one location and then be able to tell if it meets the necessary requirements that you're looking for or not. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the demonstration. We'll walk through this, what this extension, what this capability looks like in Windchill, and that'll kind of give you a better idea of what we're actually dealing with. All right, so here we are within the Windchill home screen, and I'm going to start today in the browser. So we have this advanced search window. You can expand this. It just allows us to browse through our different information, through our different products, projects, libraries, and all of that, without actually having to type in, a formal part number. Where we're going to spend most of our time today is with this advanced search capability and the classification explorer. They really do go hand in hand. Now, within Windchill, considering this is the idea of a PLM system is to be the center, the house for all of your data. Well, with Windchill being that, then there's tons of different objects that we're managing in Windchill. And you can see some of those different objects right here. We have CAD documents, CAPAs, nonconformances, problem reports, parts, all these different things, all these different objects. For today, we're going to focus specifically on parts. That's the gray gear here on the right-hand side. And what you'll see here is as I check this box, this window changes a little bit. We're going to get this classification explorer that pops up here in the bottom. And this is where you can actually search for any of the classification criteria that we're going to be looking at today, as well as add some new classifications to your Windchill search. And we'll look at that a little bit later on as well. So your classifications that we've talked about in the PowerPoint, they are searchable either through browsing, which we'll look at here in a second, or even by typing in the name or the keyword like you typically would whenever you're searching for objects in Windchill. You can find the information either way. Before we search for anything there, we're actually going to go, yeah.
Real quick, I had a question come in that asked, are the attributes default or can you customize the field names?
Yeah, you can customize, or, well, it's really not even a customization. You can basically just configure them however you want to. So you can lay out, well, we're actually going to look at the library of classifications that I have set up. Mm-hmm. I have some for electronic and mechanical components. You could set these categories up to be whatever you want. You could have whatever criteria within those categories that you want. It's entirely up to you, whoever sets it up.
Windchill's really customizable, flexible, nimble. It's a lot of good things as far as a product lifecycle management software. So
definitely. Yeah, so this is what we're looking at here, this classification explorer. This is where we are actually going to access all of the different classes and the different schema, which is essentially what you just asked about. This is where we're going to access all of that that's been set up, right? So I've laid out all of these different categories. There is ways to automate that. Instead of creating them all from scratch, you could maybe import an Excel spreadsheet, something along those lines to maybe make that a little bit easier. But really, it's not even that big of a deal because once you set them up once, you're always just going to be reusing them. It's not like you're going to have to set these classes up each time. Someone sets them up once, and then everybody across your whole organization is going to just use those classes that are already set up there. Right now on the left, you can see we have this classification tree, I'll call it. And within these different categories, electronic, for example, all of the different classes, all of the different types of parts. In this case, it's mostly shop stock type of components. But we can see all of those components here and how they're set up within this, this structure here. And if I click on any one of these, then you'll see on the right, the categories change. It updates according to whatever it is that I have selected. So if I wanted to look for a particular integrated circuit, I could either narrow my search down in the tree on the left, or I could actually do it from the right as well by selecting on either that breadcrumb trail where my mouse is or on the pictures themselves. Right, so different options for you. The pictures, these pictures are brought in from just a web image. You can bring them in from your local computer if you want to grab pictures from online or PowerPoint. I see a lot of people doing that as well. All right. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to say that I am looking for a particular component. I don't necessarily know what that component is yet. I know it's something around a metric fastener. I'm not even sure necessarily if we have a part for what I'm looking for. So what I can do is I can actually use this classification explorer to reuse components that we potentially have, or maybe just figure out if this is a part that we even have in the system at all, or if it is something that I need to potentially design or reach out to a supplier and now purchase from. What I can do is I can go all the way down. I'm looking for a particular flat washer. I can come into flat washers. And then once I get all the way down to the type of component or to the specific class that I'm looking for, now I can see all of the different washers that I'm managing in Windchill, right? So if I have any questions about, do I have a washer this size or that size, this is where I need to come. And you can actually even take this kind of to the next step. If you're working with different vendors and suppliers and you're buying a lot of these items, then you could maybe bring in that information as well to see who you're buying it from, if it's an approved supplier, if it's a preferred supplier, right? That kind of gets into another conversation, but this is some of the different criteria that you could kind of bring in and integrate with this extension as well to really actually make Windchill that single source of truth like we talk about. From here, I don't want to necessarily go through and look through each one of these 51 different washers that I have to figure out the particular one. So what I can do is come here on the left-hand side and just refine my results. Remember, I don't actually know if we have a particular part, but I want to try and look through what we have and figure that out. So sourcing status, I definitely want to filter this out to only see the things that I'm getting from an approved supplier. I want to change the outer diameter, let's say to 41. That's a specific attribute that I need. And also washer series, I want this regular, right? I could change the nominal size or the inner diameter. And each time that I do this, it's filtering down those results more and more. So I came in here not knowing really what the name of the washer was, what the size is, or if it's even something that we have in the system at all, but the classification explorer is letting me filter based on the criteria in the classes that we set up and actually find if this is a part that we have and then reuse it rather than going and wasting time potentially because we might already have it, reaching out to a supplier, purchasing more. And then not only did I spend time unnecessary on that, but now we also have duplicate parts. We have two of the same part with different part numbers, and that's going to jack up your inventory. That's going to jack up what people are using or what's on the bill of materials and what's being used in the designs as well. All right. Now what we can do from here is just to make sure that this is actually the part that I'm looking for. If I hover over that little icon in the search result, then that brings up this little pop-up window here, which is called our thumbnail navigator. And this is a really, really nice capability in Windchill because it's going to allow us to actually be sure that this is the object we're looking for before we dedicate a lot of time to searching and digging and finding information and then only to realize that we're not even looking at the right part. The thumbnail navigator is actually going to show us a visualization of that part. So this is generated from CAD. It's a lightweight representation of the CAD. It's geometrically accurate to the CAD, but this is going to let us manipulate it, work with it. If this were an assembly, we would actually be able to select on the different components as well. Washer is just one piece. There's really nothing for us to click on there, but you would even be able to select on components in an assembly. On the right-hand side of that visualization, there's two categories, where used and uses. So those are actually the different components that would make up an assembly. You can select on those components from there and even navigate to those particular pages for those particular objects and look at the specific information for them there. So it's a quick and easy way to get a better idea what you're working with and then navigate to that information very, very quickly and easily. Now this is the particular part that I'm looking at. So what we can do is I can see here all of the different information. I can see the classification that this is kind of organized within, right? To find this, we went from parts down to metric fasteners, to washers, to flat washers. So that's really your breadcrumb trail that we use to get to this point. But now that we found it, what we want to do is just go ahead and open up this part. And it's as simple as coming to the part in the search results and clicking the little bubble icon with the eye inside of it. And then that's going to actually take us to that parts page. Now, for anyone who's never worked in Windchill before, one thing in Windchill that's really nice, and it's kind of an ease of use capability essentially, or aspect of Windchill, is no matter what the object is that you're looking at, the page is pretty much the same, right? So even though I'm looking at a washer here, I could be looking at an assembly as well. I could be looking at a document, and this really home page for the object isn't going to change. I'll have my tabs at the top that are organizing the information. I'll have my details tab, I'll have my history, my where used, all of these that we'll look at today. But that's going to be it's going to be standard regardless of the object you're looking with. So once you get, acclimated with Windchill, you start to learn your way around a little bit, then it's going to be easy to find information you're looking for no matter what that object is. In here, if you look right below that visualization, then you can see the different classification groups. This is what someone asked about earlier whenever they said, are we able to specify what these groups are? And I said, yes, these are different examples of those groups. Nominal size, diameter, thickness, those sorts of things. You can lay out as many of those different classification groups as you want to for any particular object that you want. It is completely up to the user, completely up to how do you want to organize information to make it as easy as possible to organize and to find your different parts. And here, once again, is just that breadcrumb trail on this as well, showing how we actually use the Classification Explorer to get to this point. Now, one of the tabs on the top there, that toolbar, is where used. And this one's, as the name entails, this is telling us where this particular component is being used, or what assemblies this component is actually being used on. And it might be being used on different assemblies or different products or different projects, and we would be able to see that here as well. In this case, this is a washer that's being used on our radiator, which is being used on our cooling system, which is being used on our Pro Car assembly. So from that Where Used tab, we can actually move to the different levels, to the different assemblies that this part is actually being used on. Right, that's through the use of the WT parts, because those are what really relate all of the information together. Now from there, what I can do is I went to the Where Used tab for that washer, and then I just clicked on the radiator, because this is the actual assembly that washer is being used on. And what we can do from here is, within this product structure, I can go ahead and insert a new part in this structure. And the reason that we're doing this is because we're going to create a new part, and then you're going to see how we would be able to classify that as we add it to the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a standard part, and there's different information here that's required for me to enter in whenever I create a new part in Windchill. The asterisk is what entails whether or not something is mandatory to enter in. The nice part about requiring certain information is that no matter who it is that's entering the information in, no matter who it is that's creating the part or adding a document to Windchill, the information that they're going to be entering in is required and it's standardized. So regardless of who it is, you can make sure that all the necessary information is there. It's not like you're going to have someone upload a document really with no name, no information around it. None of that. It's a standard process. In this case, whenever I go to add a part, then there's an option there for me to select on classifications. And this is when I go to add a part, I can then assign it to some of these classifications that we already have set up in the system. So I'm not laying any of this out a second time. I'm just basically picking what class I want to put this into, and then it's going to be stored there and searchable for anybody in Windchill, right? So you can see there, it's the classification option right above these text boxes, and I put this one in flat washers. Now from here, whenever I go to the next page, whenever I just click next in creating this part, it then, because I selected that classification on the previous page, now I have to enter in the information for these particular groups. Now you'll notice here, I don't have any asterisks. None of this is actually required for me, but I would recommend requiring this stuff if you're going to be using Classification Explorer. You want to essentially force people to use it to make sure all of your data, all of your different parts are organized. But I'll just enter this stuff in the standard criteria that we have laid out for flat washers. And now any of this would be able to be searchable. Someone could go in and do what we did earlier, where they might not have known a washer existed. They came in here, searched on that criteria, and found that particular washer. And as soon as I complete that, you can see in the part structure that M36 plain washer has now been added to that part structure. Okay. So now that I'm done with the change, just go ahead and check this back in and make sure that everybody else can now see the updated part structure and make changes to it if they need to. And I'll just leave a comment with the check-in to let everybody know what I did. All right, looks pretty good. So now with that part now classified and managed in the system, we're going to go ahead and try to search for it using that Classification Explorer. So I'm just going to wipe out all of the classifications that we had up previously. We'll just reset those so we can search this from scratch. I'm already in the flat washers category, but we added a new one in, so we're just going to make sure that it's here. So I'll go ahead and search for M36 regular washer, since that's what I created. And you can see there, we already have that being managed in the system. It's already going to be classified as well, because as we created that, we searched on that classification group for flat washers, right? So this would be findable by anybody in the system. Even if they didn't know the keywords that I typed, they would be able to refine the results on the left-hand side and find that particular washer. The last topic that I want to show you today within this Parts Classification Explorer is more on the administration side of things. So how would you actually manage these classifications and create these different nodes and groups and schema that we're actually classifying these parts in, right? So let me just expand this here. And this is going to be the exact same as what we've looked at today. This is just where we actually go to set all of these classes up. You know, if I wanted to look at flat washers, you know the criteria that's in there because we were looking at it earlier. We entered in the different attributes for nominal size, diameter, washer series, those types of things. This is where you're going to come to either remove these, to add them, to change them. You can even have naming rules for them as well. It's really simple to lay all this out. You will literally just click the plus sign above this table here to add in different attributes or different classes. And then as soon as you add one in, then it's going to be, you know, prevalent throughout all of Windchill. So that's really all that I wanted to go through for Windchill Parts Classification. This is what it is in a nutshell. go through searching for information using the Explorer. We created a new part within the product and assigned it classes to search on in the system. And then we finished off here just taking a brief look at the administrative side of parts classification, where you're actually creating and then managing the nodes and the schema in Windchill. So this really isn't a difficult tool to use. It's a pretty simple concept, but it's extremely, extremely valuable. Even more so as you get more parts, as you're managing more parts and you have more products and your supply chain becomes more complex and you're working with more vendors and suppliers for potentially each of the different locations you have. That's, as you grow, parts classification is going to be more and more valuable, more and more critical for your organization.
Hey, Zach, one of our Windchill customers is on the line, and they just sent a question in saying that they checked Windchill while on the webinar and said that the classification Explorer is not an option. So is that because it's an added feature, or is it because he has an earlier version of Windchill?
Yeah, Parts Classification Explorer is an extension of Windchill, so he does not have the extension.
Okay.
And essentially, if you were to get it, I'm pretty sure that it's just basically something that you would unlock. I don't think there's any additional installs or anything like that.
I will look into that for the customer. Absolutely. So I think that's it. If anybody else has any, another question came in. Here we go. Oh, awesome. It was a response, not a question. All right, cool. Zach, great job.
Thank you.
This is really interesting. Next week, we're going to have a webinar, another in our Windchill series, regarding supplier management. So be on the lookout for that email, which will probably come out on Friday. And we're gonna have Windchill webinars every Wednesday, hopefully through September, just to kind of give some more education about Windchill and what its capabilities are and what it can do, and hopefully people find it useful. So thanks again, Zach. I appreciate you leading the charge today. And thanks to all of our attendees. And we're going to end the webinar now. And this will be set up on YouTube so that you can watch the recording at your leisure. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.